Some people think that the Las Vegas Raiders season is over, and I'm not saying it's not, but there's some things we got to find out before the season ends. We got to find out if Scott Turner is the next Ben Johnson. We need to find out if Antonio Pierce is legit. We need to find out if Gardner Minshew can show any sort of hope with the brand new offensive coordinator. And we need to find out if some of our offensive linemen should actually be here next year. We need to find out which rookie is for real and which rookie is not. And apparently there's one rookie cornerback who looks very, very, very solid for the Raiders, which we'll talk about here in a second. But apparently Jordan Meredith has taken over the job, the starting job for the Las Vegas Raiders. Antonio Pierce had some very interesting words to say. Check this out.
I think Jordan Meredith, we haven't talked enough about him, but Jordan's done a hell of a job filling in. And the way he's been playing, he's earned the right to be a starter going forward. And so you feel comfortable with the guys you got there. You just hate that we keep changing all these pieces amongst the offensive line, because at some point, you like just to have 5 guys there, continuity, chemistry. That's really that's the glue to our team, right? When you can have that. So something we're working on consistently.
So AP is telling us that Jordan Meredith has apparently been playing so well that he's earned the starting job going forward. Antonio Pierce did not say he'll be filling in. We have injuries. He said he's earned the starting job as we go forward. Now, does that mean Dylan Parham's lost his spot, or does that mean someone else has potentially lost their spot? We're going to talk about that, but I do want to just mention this before we get into that. Jordan Meredith to me is a very, very good offensive lineman. I called him the Cody Whitehair in his prime, right? I compared the two guys earlier on this offseason, and I am happy that this guy's finally being able to put it out there, because I think Jordan Meredith is actually a really, really good offensive lineman. If you guys focus on PFF grades, he's been one of the guys that's been graded really high. PFF uses an AI tracking tool, which they've trained essentially to tell you positive things that are happening, right? If a guy's doing a positive job out there according to their models, they're going to get a high PFF grade. If they're not, they'll get a low PFF grade. So Meredith, according to these models, has been doing a really good job. And Meredith's only in like his 3rd year, right? So the guy still has so much upside to continue to develop and continue to get better. But Jordan Meredith has done a hell of a job. And I am happy that the Las Vegas Raiders are crediting this guy and saying that he is going to be the starter as we go forward. Because these are the little things we got to figure out. Is Dylan Parham the future? Is Andre James the future? Is DJ Glaze the future? And that's just on the offensive line. There's guys on the other side of the football that we got to figure out as well, right? But one of the interesting things with saying that Jordan Meredith is the starter as we go forward is whose job is he ultimately taking? Now, we know 3 weeks ago Jackson Powers-Johnson was playing left guard, but with Andre James going down, Jackson Powers-Johnson has moved into the center position, and a mixture of Cody Whitehair and Jordan Meredith have kind of replaced that left guard position. Initially, it was Cody Whitehair that took over that left guard job, but Cody Whitehair went down. Dylan Parham also had some injury issues, and Meredith essentially stepped in right there for whichever guy ended up ultimately going down. If I was a betting man, I think the Las Vegas Raiders are essentially going to bench Andre James. I think it just logically makes sense that Andre James is a weak link on the offensive line. He's not a top 10 center or top 15 center. In fact, he's probably like a bottom 10 guy. To me, it just makes sense that Jackson Powers-Johnson just starts as your future center going forward. You don't ever take him out, right? For the next 15 years, Jackson Powers-Johnson should be the guy. So to me, it makes sense that with Powers-Johnson ultimately taking over the center position, the left guard spot was kind of up in the air. Maybe it's Cody Whitehair, maybe it's Jordan Meredith. Andres Pete was another guy that's kind of come in there and played a little bit at that position. And I think what Antonio Pierce is telling us is that Jordan Meredith is now the starting guard as we go forward. And I think this is huge. When you think about the Raiders offensive line from the time we came into the season, right? Really think about this. There was a time when the Raiders said, we're going to put Andre James at center. We're going to put Thayer Munford at right tackle. Cody Whitehair is our starting left guard. Remember, that's a terrible ass offensive line, right? Those are like 3 guys that have no business starting. And we've slowly started to replace some of these guys, right? We finally put in DJ Glaze at right tackle, and we don't know if this guy's the future or not, but he's better than Thayer Munford. I think most of us can agree with that. We put in Jackson Powers-Johnson over Andre James at center. That's also a common ass sense decision right there. The left guard battle was kind of up in the air. I personally never really liked Cody Whitehair. Jordan Meredith makes sense. I think Andres Pete's another guy that you could probably put in that left guard. But he also plays left tackle for us, so I understand why you don't want to throw him in at left guard. But it makes sense that the Raiders have now went forward with arguably our best offense line that we'll have. What's interesting is this is the 6th different combination that the Raiders have had. We got Colt Miller at left tackle, and he should be good to go. We'll talk about some of the injuries here in a second. Jordan Meredith at left guard, Andre James at center, Dylan Parham at right guard, and of course, DJ Glaze at right tackle. And apparently, the offensive line's communication has been one of the big issues. That's at least what Coach Scott Turner, the new offensive coordinator, told us in his presser yesterday. He put it out there. He said that it seems like Turner's thinking was that the biggest issue with the run game was the communication on the offensive line. And I agree 100% with that. And you guys can watch tape, and if you guys watch enough tape, you will start to realize the same similarities that happen over and over and over and over again. You know, it's not that our guys up front are just getting their asses kicked, right? Although that was happening when Cody Whitehair and Andre James were in there. But when Jackson Powers Johnson is in there, he's bullying people. He's moving people. When Dylan Parham's healthy, he's able to impose his will against a lot of different guys. What was happening was these guys didn't recognize every single step that they had to take, right? And I'll give you an example. You know, if you're running an outside zone to the left, the offensive linemen have to jump an entire gap to that side, right? If there's a guy directly to their left, right on their shoulder, they got to get in front of that guy. They got to cut him off. If it's an inside zone, right? And let's say you're the left tackle and you have a guy to your outside, instead of trying to get in front of this guy and seal him off, on an inside zone, it's a little bit different. You take a shorter, shallower step, and you're going to take this guy and push him outwards, right? So this is a little bit different. And then if you're running duo, for example, which is a power-based run concept, you're going to double team, you know, center, right guard, center, left guard. You're going to double team that one technique. And then you need to climb up to that linebacker depending on which way the linebacker ultimately shoots. And if the linebacker shoots one way and both guys get confused and they're not able to pick it up properly, it's gonna throw things off, right? Run game's not gonna work if guys are not able to properly understand who has who, right? So there's just a lot of little things that were wrong with the offensive line, but it's never been that our players are not good enough. At least the current offensive line unit we have, I think we're gonna have a lot of success. So I'm actually excited to watch the Raiders offensive line as we go into this next week against the Miami Dolphins. And I think it's a massive game for the Raiders. And I want to go ahead and just take a second to talk a little bit about this matchup. You know, some people are going to say the Raiders should just lose the rest of their games. They should just get a quarterback. You'll get a top 3 or 4 pick. And I do like that idea, right? And obviously, you know, that's the best case scenario for the Raiders. You lose out, you get a quarterback. That quarterback wins you 10 Super Bowls. Best case scenario. But you got to think about the realistic scenarios, right? You can lose out all of these games. You can draft a quarterback. You don't get Ben Johnson. You don't get Bobby Slowick because these guys don't want to go to the shittiest teams in the NFL. And you might end up hiring Luke Getsy as your head coach. And that quarterback's now going to bust out. And you don't have a quarterback here in the same spot. Maxx Crosby's getting older. Colton Miller's getting ready to retire. You know, if you want to capitalize on the current roster that you have, you got to make sure things just kind of pan out well. And you're getting a coach that can actually put it together. Right, you look at a team like the Los Angeles Chargers as a great example of this. So the Chargers had Tom Telesco drafting. They have Brandon Stanley coaching for the last 5 years. The roster was always really good. On paper, all of us looked at that roster and said they're going to be a good football team. They went all in on the rookie contract that Herbert had, but because of the coach, they just struggled. And then you look at the only difference they have this year versus last year, which was the coaching. And in fact, some people think they actually got worse, getting rid of guys like Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. They also changed up their offensive line a little bit. People thought they'd actually be worse this year, but they're a lot better, right? And a part of that is because of the coach. Take another example here. Last year, Ben Johnson could have became a head coach, and he had the option to go to the Bears, who had the number 1 overall pick, or he could go to the Commanders, who had the number 2 overall pick, and he could have picked whichever quarterback he wanted. And if he took that head coaching job for the next how many ever years, he might have been able to have a lot of success. But apparently Adam Schefter put it out there that Ben Johnson doesn't want to go to a bad organization. And for us, although I love the Raiders, we're a bad organization. Let's just call it what it is, right? So to me, it's not guaranteed that the quarterback you get in the draft is going to be a good quarterback. And I think it's also a lot more important to make sure you have a good head coach and you have a good play caller, which also kind of takes me to Scott Turner. You know, Scott Turner was a pass game coordinator for the Raiders, and after half the season ends, he gets a job, and now he has an opportunity to prove if he's a good offense coordinator or not. The Lions went through this same exact thing back in 2021. The Lions hired Anthony Lynn to be the offensive coordinator for Dan Campbell, and Anthony Lynn did not have any success. They started 0-11. And then Dan Campbell fired Anthony Lynn after being 0-11, and he hired their pass game coordinator to become the offensive coordinator and call plays. That guy was Ben Johnson. So Ben Johnson took over after the Lions went 0-11. He started calling plays. They won 3 of the next 6 games. They came in next year, won 9 games. The following year, won 13 games. And now he's the hottest name in football, right? So Ben Johnson took the same exact approach that Scott Turner's kind of on. And I'm not saying Scott Turner is going to be a great offensive coordinator, but if you guys ask me, right, would I rather win 80% of our games going forward and, we lose out on the draft pick, but what that means is Scott Turner's a top 5 offensive coordinator. I would take that 100% over getting a quarterback because I don't think quarterbacks matter all that much. To me, you can find Baker Mayfield in the NFL. You can find Sam Darnold in the NFL. You can find quarterbacks that can run your scheme and system. Kyle Shanahan brings in Jimmy G. He brings in Brock Purdy. He brings in whoever it is. And for the most part, he's able to have success. That's because he's a good coach. The Raiders got to try winning football games, in my opinion. I don't care what anybody says. I will continue to take that approach. The draft really doesn't matter a whole lot. We also have to recognize there might only be one quarterback that's worth the first overall pick. And every other quarterback could be third-round prospects. So we don't really know if there's even a quarterback available in this class to take. And I just don't see the Raiders having the first overall pick regardless because there's other teams that have won 2 games that are probably not going to win another game, right? And I think those teams are a lot worse than the Raiders are. That's just my personal opinion. Regardless of that, you got a game coming up against the Miami Dolphins. The Raiders do have some injuries, so Nate Hobbs did hurt his ankle. He's out. Andre James has an ankle injury. He's out. Cody Whitehair is also out. So when Antonio Pierce is telling us that Jordan Meredith will be the starter going forward, obviously we do have to recognize both Andre James and Cody Whitehair are both out, so we don't have any other options. But I still think when that time comes, there's going to be a good chance that Meredith obviously still continues to be the guy. The Raiders will have to also call up some practice squad offensive linemen because we only have 5 guys on the active roster with these guys out. So we'll figure out what they kind of do. Michael Mayer just started practicing. He is questionable, although Antonio Pierce does think he will be good to go. And I do hope we get to see him a little bit. Jacoby Myers is going to be good to go. Dylan Parham's good to go. Robert Spillane, which was another one, he missed the game against the Bengals, or part of it, right? He ended up getting knocked out. It's going to be pivotal for the Raiders to be able to have success against the Dolphins. Because I think if we want to get this season on track, if we want to be able to win some games and show that we can actually, have success going into next season, we have that offensive coordinator. This is where it's going to kind of start. The Dolphins are not that good of a football team, in my opinion. In fact, Jalen Ramsey also ended up getting hurt apparently yesterday, and he might be out, right? So that's going to benefit the Raiders. And then I also think that the Dolphins' offensive line is a lot weaker this year than it's been in the last year. They obviously lost their best offensive lineman in Robert Hunt last year. Coming into this year, Teron Armstead's hurt, so they might have a rookie tackle starting. It's going to be an interesting game. I do think if the Raiders are able to win, I would hope we win because our offense puts up 35 points, right? I would hope that our offense is what carries the Raiders and it's not the defense that carries us. Because if we win by scoring 7 points, then it's winless wins at that point, right? It doesn't make sense. But I do want to see the Raiders improve a little bit. And I think the Raiders can obviously improve, right? I think one of the things we can see as we end this season is, Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, can these 2 guys actually work together? And then can both of these guys get like 7-8 catches, right? Can we get both of these guys involved? Because there was a time when, 3 or 4 years ago, there was a time when I was doing my NFL draft, my draft stuff that I obviously do. And one of the things I remember was, it was like November of 2021. And this Notre Dame tight end kept flashing, right? Everyone's like, this is the guy, right? I think it was Aaron Banks that I was watching. And, he flashed over and over and over again. Michael Mayer just kept looking really, really good. And at one point, he was considered the best tight end in all of college football. And people were like, this guy's going to be a top 10 pick. And the only reason he was not a top 10 pick, in my opinion, was the fact that I think some NFL teams felt like the tight end position is not very valuable. And unless you got a guy like Kyle Pitts or Brock Bowers, it doesn't make sense to take these guys in the first round. But to me, Michael Mayer has a ton of upside. So I want to figure out how we utilize both Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers, and can we make it work? And then let's see if the run game can get going a little bit. Let's see if Scott Turner is able to change things up a little bit. Turner talked about how important it is for him to make sure guys are on the same page in terms of the communication. He's going to tweak some things here or there, right? He put that out there as well. So I'm excited to see what this offense can actually turn into. And then let's go ahead and wrap this video up. There's a cornerback for the Raiders that played a lot of snaps this past week. Jacorian Bennett, not 100% sure if he was hurt going into that Bengals game, but Decamerion Richardson played a lot of snaps against the Cincinnati Bengals. Richardson played, I think, over 30 snaps, or about around 30, and the guy had so many great plays, and you can see the potential in Decamerion Richardson. You can see that long frame this guy has, that speed, that quickness. You know, he gets his hands on these wide receivers. He's able to disrupt timing. He's fast. He's able to stick with guys. Generally speaking, I mean, Decamerion Richardson pretty much did a positive thing on every single one of his snaps. I don't think I saw one losing snap from Richardson. He made all the smart plays. You know, in zone coverage, he got into his dropbacks. In man-to-man coverage, he was aggressive. He's physical. He had some plays where he was lined against Jamar Chase, right, and got his hands right into this guy. I think there's real upside with Decamerion Richardson. I think there's real upside with what this guy can actually become. You know, Jacorian Bennett, a lot of people are like, hey, that's a top 10 potential cornerback. And I agree with that. I think Jacorian Bennett's really, really, really good. But there's also a chance that Decamerion Richardson could be that next guy for the Raiders. And I think one of the things that I personally realize with cornerbacks is cornerbacks are kind of like quarterbacks, where depending on the system, you'll have more success versus less success, right? Dan Quinn is a great example of a guy that just finds great corners, right? Dan Quinn knows exactly how to coach guys up. He's able to find guys, they fit his scheme, and they're just legit, right? They took a cornerback out of Michigan this past year, I think in the second round. Some people say he's already a top 15 cornerback. The guy's legit, right? And I think a part of that is Dan Quinn knows how to coach it up. For years, Bill Belichick had all these cornerbacks that he was just throwing them out there, right? Whoever it was, you know, Malcolm Butler, Stephon Gilmore, just over and over and over again. This guy was able to find corners. And I think a part of that is because of his system. And I say that because I think Patrick Graham also has that same kind of approach. Right? I think Decamerion Richardson is just another corner that Patrick Graham was able to find and then kind of mold into the type of guy he wants. And Jacorian Bennett's having a lot of success. That's a Patrick Graham handpicked play right there. Isaiah Pola-Mao is another guy that's been pretty solid. Although Pola-Mao hasn't been as good as I thought he would be, he's been pretty solid as well. But Jacorian Bennett's been the guy for the Raiders. Jack Jones came in here, and although Jack Jones was an original New England Patriots corner, Patrick Graham has that connection, right, to Bill Belichick. His scheme is a lot similar to the way Bill Belichick ultimately runs, and it just made sense as well, right? Patrick Graham was able to bring in Jack Jones, and it made sense. It worked well. And I think Richardson could also be one of those guys that ends up being a good football player. So we'll see how things kind of go as we go forward. Nate Hobbs is expected to be out, so we'll see which corner actually ends up stepping in and kind of playing. There's another guy that the Raiders had picked up. His name is Darnay Holmes. He played a lot this past week in the slot, but we'll see if he actually continues to play there. Maybe they put Jacorian Bennett in the slot. We'll see what ends up happening. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, man. Let me know what you guys think. I know a lot of people are ready to tank. I'm just not for that. You know, I have my personal beliefs on, I think, you know, your coach is a lot more important than anything else. And which coach wants to go to a team that's only won 2 games, right? Especially today, you know, coaches are starting to realize and figure out that if the situation they don't go into, you know, if it's a bad situation and the team's willing to panic and, you know, fans are screaming at the owner, so they quickly fire the coach. If coaches that are about to become head coaches realize that a team might do that, they might panic the way Mark Davis ultimately did, right? A coach isn't going to go to that situation, right? So understand that if the Raiders want to bring in a good coach, they got to prove that they're a solid roster, that they're a solid team, solid organization. And hopefully the Raiders are able to kind of build towards it. I do think having Tom Brady and Tom Telesco will help the Raiders. So we'll see what ends up happening. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time with another video.